Hi guys, and welcome back to Healing Conversations with Sophie Hurley. So if you're new here, this is where we have conversations, people don't always feel comfortable having, the raw ones, the honest ones, the ones that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but might also make you think. And, today we're talking about drugs. So not in a preachy way, not in a don't do this or you're a bad person way, just real from my own experience because, I've lived it. So I used to abuse drugs, and I don't say that lightly. It started young, around 13. Started smoking weed first. That felt harmless at the time. Everyone around me was doing it. It felt normal. It felt social. It felt like part of growing up because it was the norm. But then it did escalate. So I was introduced to ecstasy very early on by previous boyfriends, or shall I say a previous boyfriend, sorry. I was young, curious, I've always had a curious mind. I wanted to experience things. I want to feel things deeply. And if I'm being brutally honest, I've always had a slightly addictive personality. When I like something, I really like it. And drugs did feel exciting at the time. They felt rebellious, grown up, wild and free. So when you're on MDMA or ecstasy, it does feel incredible. Let's not lie about it. You feel connected to everyone. Music sounds like it's running through your veins. You're hugging your friends, telling them how much you love them. You feel understood, seen, euphoric. So I used to go raving all the time, Fabric, other clubs, festivals. Me and my best friend at the time would literally, like every single time, would sneak off to the toilets away from everyone else and just sit down in there and have the deepest, most loving chats about life. Like we'd crack the code of the universe. And in those moments, it did feel magical. But what people don't talk about enough is what comes after, because the come down is much worse than the come up. The anxiety that creeps in days later, the racing heart, the dread, the overthinking, every conversation you had the night before, the depression that hits literally out of nowhere, that empty feeling when the dopamine disappears. And then there were the moments that weren't just uncomfortable, right? They were like absolutely terrifying. So I'll tell you a story. One night after Fabric, which is a nightclub in London, if you don't know, I blacked out in the back of a car, completely gone. I remember fading and thinking, this is it. And, this is the end. Like, this is how I'm going to die. That wasn't dramatic in my head, but, it felt real, so real. And that was shortly after I'd been to Ibiza. And Ibiza, oh my God, I thought I was hard. I thought I was experienced. I thought I was going, sorry, I can't get my words out again. As usual, we have this problem every time. I thought going to Ibiza and taking a concoction of drugs made me something, like it made me big and cool and unstoppable. It literally didn't, it's not clever. On a beach out there, Bora Bora Beach, I took way too much ketamine one time. It wasn't, some spiritual awakening moment. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't cool. It was just uncomfortable and disorientating. Didn't know what the hell was going on. I felt like I was detached from myself and my body. It didn't feel like mine. My brain just felt completely scrambled. Nothing catastrophic. I can't say that word. Catastrophic happened, but that doesn't mean it was safe. It doesn't mean it was clever for me to do that. And here's the scary part. So I came back from my beef thinking I could handle it, like I'd built some kind of tolerance or superpower towards drugs, like I'd leveled up. Then I did have a long break, didn't touch anything for a while. I did feel clearer, calmer, no anxiety. My body felt more stable. My mind felt stable. But then I met up with a friend and we did ecstasy again around hers. The exact same thing happened. Heart pounding out of my chest, palpitations that wouldn't slow down, overthinking, overwhelming thought, I'm going to die. And it really wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't euphoric. It was just pure panic. And that was one of the most scariest experiences of my life. But I do need to say this clearly, drugs are really not to be messed with. I'm not naive. I'm not going to sit here and say never experiment. People are always going to do what feels good to them, especially when you're young, especially when you're surrounded by it all, especially when it does look glamorous and fun. But please just be careful and know your limits. And more importantly, know when to stop. Taking more really doesn't make you impressive. It doesn't make you cool. It doesn't make you experienced. It doesn't make you tough. It just makes it much more dangerous. And for me, drugs didn't affect my nights out. They affected my mental health long term. They contributed to the psychosis that I have now. They made my mind much more fragile. And if you're already having, underlying anxiety, trauma, sensitivity, adding class A drugs into the mix is like pouring petrol onto a fire. It just makes it worse. And I say this with love. If you're already struggling mentally, drugs really, they're not the one to go to. They're not your friend. The come down and everything is just going to be so much more worse. What goes up must come down. They might feel like your friend for a few hours, days, whatever, however long you're taking them for, but they will collect, payment later. You have to face reality at some point. But I also realised something really important through that all. Some friendships were, built purely around taking drugs. When I stopped, those connections did fade. And that hurt at first, but it also made me wiser. It showed me who was really there for me and who was there just for the party. Drugs gave me highs, but they also gave me a lot of lessons. And thankfully, I've always had this inner voice that knew when to pull away from the really, really dark path. I never went into heroin or crack, and I won't speak on them because I'm not educated enough and I haven't experienced them, so I won't talk on those sort of things. I won't pretend to know something I don't. But what I do know is this: the high is temporary. The aftermath can last much longer. It can, affect you for years later. Your brain chemistry is not something to gamble with. To the younger listeners especially, listen to me clearly. You do not need drugs to be interesting. You do not need them to belong. You do not need them to be fun or to fit in. And you definitely do not need them to prove anything. Curiosity is totally normal. We all are curious at times. Wanting to feel good is absolutely normal. It's human. But be cautious, respect your body and respect your mind, because once your mental health shifts, once psychosis creeps in, once anxiety takes over, it's not as simple as just stopping. If this episode makes one person think twice before doubling their dose, before taking another line, before mixing substances, before chasing a bigger high, then it's worth me sharing this episode. You are not weak for wanting to feel good, but you are strong when you know when to stop. And trust me, that strength is far more powerful than any high. So yeah, I just mainly wanted to share that with you today. This is a shorter episode today, but I hope that any listeners take this on board and just it reaches the right person today. But yeah, thank you for listening to this episode and stay tuned for more episodes coming soon. Take care. Love you. Bye bye.